joining you here from Brew AMU, and today we're going to be here talking about coffee. So, speaking of coffee, I'm going to grab mine, and we're going to go talk to my friend Kevin Berke with Starbucks, and we're going to spend a good amount of time with you today talking about all different kinds of coffee drinks. Kevin's with Starbucks, great expert on this, so we're lucky to have him today. So, folks, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin right now. I'll be here throughout the program, so if you have questions, make sure you let us know if you have a question about your favorite coffee drink. We'll get that, and we'll try to answer those questions live today. But Kevin, thanks for being here today, and let's get started.
Thanks for having me. As Alex mentioned, I'm Kevin Berke. I've been working with Starbucks and Starbucks brands for almost 20 years now. So Sodexo Food Service, as you know, already has several coffee shops on campus that serve Starbucks. They've asked me to come here and give a little coffee knowledge, Starbucks knowledge. Hopefully I'll make it interesting. I have a quick little MU shout out. My daughter Cassandra graduated from here in 17, and my son Nick goes here and he's a sophomore. So my little MU connection. To start off, have you ever wondered how Starbucks got its name?
I have, Kevin. Yes.
Thank you. Good cue. All right, I'll tell you. So Starbucks was founded in 1971 in Seattle in Pike Market. If you've ever been there, it's this cool marketplace on the Puget Sound. It leads out to the Pacific Ocean. So a lot of our themes are nautical. So if you've ever read Herman Melville's Moby Dick, Moby Dick's lead character is Captain Ahab. He's the sailor gone mad. He's got this first mate who's a coffee lover named Starbuck. So Starbucks coffee.
Wow, Kevin, that is interesting. I actually didn't even know that, so that is pretty good. And a literature lesson for you today.
Also, have you ever wondered who this gal is? If you know a little bit about mythology, she is a siren. And a siren is a mermaid who's a temptress. She wails and serenades and lures sailors to come crash into the reefs. And then she does whatever she does to sailors. We use the temptress with the aroma of the coffee to lure people into the stores. So she is our siren. Have you ever wondered what kind of plant coffee comes from?
Yes, Kevin. I have always wondered what kind of plant coffee comes from.
Thank you so much.
Right.
So coffee comes from a cherry tree. Literally, you could pick the cherry, you can eat the cherry. The pit of the cherry are 2 green coffee beans. Obviously not like the bin cherries you get at the grocery store. It's a coffee cherry. And one coffee cherry tree produces 1 pound of coffee a year. So there's a lot of coffee cherry trees, right? Everybody thinks Starbucks are the big guys, and we are the largest specialty coffee company in the world. We have about 35,000 stores. We're in over 70 countries, but we only buy 3% of the world's beans. So there are a lot of coffee cherry trees out there. If you've wondered where coffee cherry trees grow, think about the globe and the equator. And on either side of the equator is the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So anywhere in the tropics, in mountainous regions, is where coffee grows. So you think of areas like South America, everybody's heard of Colombian coffee. Central America, like Panama and Nicaragua, Costa Rica. Africa, like Kenya, Ethiopia. And then all those Asia-Pacific islands, Indonesia, they grow some of the world's best coffees. There's even an island called Java. So maybe that's where the nickname for coffee comes from. Who knows? Let's say it is. So someday, some people come to me and say, so what makes Starbucks so special? What makes them think they're different than any other coffee company? So I have 3 answers for you. And the first one is the type of beans we buy. So if you picture that mountain, the lower portion of the mountain grows one species of coffee called Robusta. And Robusta beans are just a poorer grade coffee. They're not as flavorful, they're not as aromatic, and frankly they're mass produced. You can get machines in the bases of the mountains and they turn and burn, and that's what most coffee companies get because it's cheaper and it's easy to get to. The beans that grow in the upper portion of the mountains are called Arabica beans, and they're much higher in quality, they're more flavorful, they're more aromatic. The cherry stays on the tree longer because of the lower oxygen levels, gets more of an intense flavor, and they're all hand-picked. They're picked when they're ripe for a lot of reasons, better being. Well, Starbucks only buys the high-grade Arabicas. All of our coffee purchasing decisions are based on the taste of the coffee, nothing else. We literally taste all coffees 26 times before we purchase the batch. So that's one thing is the beans. So now, no matter what company you are, you pick these beans, you got to get the fruit off to get to those 2-grain coffee beans. And there's basically 2 ways. There's a wet method and a dry method. The wet method involves soaking them in water. There's some fermentation involved. The cherry part bloats up, comes off, you've got the green bean. The dry method involves laying it on a hard surface, and the sun comes baking down, and you rake it over this hard surface. The cherry part crackles off, you've got the green bean. Neither way is better than the other. It all has to do with how much access to fresh water a region has. So let's say Ethiopia doesn't have a lot of fresh water in the area, they would use the dry method. So now you've got these green coffee beans. No matter what company you are, you have to roast them. So you put it in this giant roaster, goes round and round, and it's kind of a cool process because they don't just flick a switch and then stand there and wait. They're chemists, they're watching monitors, they're opening and closing flaps, they're doing whatever they do. But at 9 minutes, the beans pop open like popcorn. And then a lot of companies stop roasting because it's expensive. You got all the energy involved, you got all the labor involved. If you're mass producing, turning and burning, you want to get done. So if you've ever opened a can of, let's say, Folgers, and it looks kind of like cinnamon, that is a 9-minute roast called the cinnamon roast. Well, Starbucks believes we roast our beans to an optimum level. What we're trying to do is draw the natural oils out of the beans because that's where the flavor is. So we roast our beans anywhere from 9 to 15 minutes. 15-minute roast is actually our French roast, and it's our one roast that we're not brewing for a taste profile, we're brewing for that charred flavor. We literally only roast it at night because it sends so much smoke in the skies, people call the fire department. So, that's the second thing is our roast. And then finally, you've got all these hot beans, so you dump them on this large platter, and there's cool air suction beneath and wands moving around. But there's 4 enemies to coffee. There are 4 things that make coffee stay. The first one's air, light, moisture, and heat. So imagine these hot beans producing moisture, they're in the light and they're in the air. All 4 enemies of the coffee are attacking at once. So you have to get it packaged quickly. And this is what I think sets Starbucks apart from any other company, is our freshness standards. Our goal is to get all of our coffee packed within the first 2 hours of roasting, but truthfully, we get almost all of it packaged within 20 minutes. And the way we're able to do that is we invented this valve, which I'll show you once we get back there. I'll show you all of our coffee bags. It's called a flavor lock, and it allows heat and gas from those warm beans to get out of the bag without the air getting in, and it's how we're able to package it so fresh. So you know if it's in a can or if it's in some kind of bag without a valve, it sat out a long time before they packaged it. So, let me tell you a little bit about drip coffee. That's coffee. That's what everybody talks about. Strong, hot, and black. And in Starbucks world, there's basically what we call a roast spectrum. There's a mild, there's a medium, and there are some bold ones. And our mild, and you may have heard of this, it's in our blonde roast category. It's our most mild. And here it's called Veranda. There's a few other options out there, but they serve Veranda. Then there's our medium blends, and our most popular is what we brew in all 35,000 stores every day, and it's our pipe roast. And then there are several bold options. Here they've got Verona, they've got a few other options, but they're roasted darker, and they've got the darker, richer flavor. So if you're new to the coffee world, you probably want to start with the mild, work your way up as you're enjoying the different flavors. A lot of people ask me, well, what about the caffeine? And my own mother, she drinks Starbucks and she's like, oh, I'm so wired. The funny thing is the darker the roast, the less caffeine there is. So our most mild coffees actually have more caffeine because caffeine roasts off as you roast the coffee longer. So little factor. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about drip coffee, and there's several different ways to brew coffee. And here in the most common way is called drip coffee. It's brewed in a drip coffee brewer. The water just drips through the coffee and filter into the pot.
And Kevin, that's what we would use at home mostly. For a lot of folks use
that's what most
coffee,
people, yeah, very good. Like a Mr. Coffee type of machine, the little glass pot you have at home, that's what most people use. You've seen K-cups and there's other things too. But there's 4 things really important as you're learning about coffee and deciding which way you want to brew at home and which way you like the most, there are four things we call it fundamentals of coffee, and it's proportion, grind, water, and freshness. So we talked about freshness, but at home, you really want to have your coffee held in some kind of an airtight canister, because air is bad for coffee, something opaque, so light's not getting in, and you don't want to keep it away from heat and moisture. So a lot of people think, oh, I'll put it in the refrigerator or freezer. That's bad. Moisture, you don't want that. So you want to keep your coffee fresh. The grind is another thing that's obviously very important. And the grind has to do with how much time the coffee and the water are hanging out together. So if it's real quick, like espresso, which we'll show you in the espresso machine, it takes about 15 to 18 seconds for the water to get through the grind. That's very fine. You want a lot of surface area. If it's a long time, like I'm going to show you now, the French press, the press pot, the coffee and the water sitting here together for 4 minutes, hanging out together. So you want a very coarse grind. I pre-ground this, but if you look real closely, you can kind of see larger chunks, and that's what you want. All of your regular drip coffee is more of a medium grind, but the grind is important, again, with basically how much time it spends in the water. I'm going to go ahead and get this French press started while I tell you about the other two fundamentals of coffee. In this particular case, you want to make sure you get your coffee wet. I talked about the water. We brew hotter than most companies. Our water is 200 degrees. And if you know, boiling is 212. So we're just under a boil. We think that helps. Oops, I poured a little too much. We think that helps with the extraction and the flavor, but most companies are around 185. I'm making a mess here. I put too much.
This is the value of live TV.
Yes, don't do that. And then you want to set this, oops, for 4 minutes.
Now, Kevin, where can we get a French press like this? I know this looks like the Starbucks branded one. These are available for sale. We're looking at packages to offer to you as students, faculty, and staff that we can sell here at the brew location. French press package with some coffee to go along with it, so you can kind of follow along with what Kevin is doing here today. So, Kevin, so at this point we've got the water in there, 200 degrees. We had our coffee already in, and now we're just waiting.
Yeah, we're waiting for 4 minutes in this particular case. And the other thing about the water, not just the temperature, but you really want to use filtered water as a general rule. Frankly, it's at home, you're probably going to pull it out of your tap. But if you've ever traveled around the country or the world and tasted their tap water, you'll notice it's different. It's different everywhere. And that's just because there's different impurities or different things in the water in different localities. But if you want that consistency, you want it always to taste the same, you want to use filtered water. So coffee is actually 98% water, so water obviously is very important.
So Kevin, can you talk to us a little bit more about what is the French press all about? I mean, so far I don't know much about this. I just know that we have water and coffee in there. What is the actual process? What's the French press all about?
So coffee lovers, true coffee lovers, prefer this method for a couple reasons. The big one is there's no paper filter in here. Paper filter tends to hold back some of the oils as the water is traveling through it. And so if you want full flavor, and truthfully this will be a little bolder than having a drip coffee version of the same coffee, but this will have, so what will happen here is there's a screen here on top of the plunger, and at 4 minutes I'm going to plunge this down so the screen is pushing all the coffee grounds to the bottom and holding it there. Then I'll be able to pour off, and on the top will be an oily, very flavorful, very aromatic coffee. So this typically is a preferred way for coffee lovers. But it's not as convenient. It takes some grinding, it takes some